Or maybe you've been selling for years and want to take your business to the next level. Here, this may help out. Live events like this allow you to connect with us here at Amazon and get the latest tips and tricks from real selling experts. We're excited you're with us today. Impressive. It means you're one step closer to reaching your Amazon selling potential. Sounds good, right? There's lots to learn, so let's get going. First, let's set the stage for today's session. We'll have a presentation, some videos, and lots of time for your questions to be answered by a selling expert or experts. To ask a question, simply drop it into the chat box. Don't worry if it says in moderation. That just means we're waiting for the Q&A time to open up. We have a great turnout today, and we'd love to know who you are. So feel free to update your name to a nickname using the settings in your participants box. If you have technical issues during the event, send us a message and we'll help you out. All right, without further ado, let's start the session.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Jeremy. I'm with Amazon's global selling team, and I help US sellers expand their business into Europe. Today, we have Crystal joining us from one of our great compliance partners, VATAi. And to kick things off, I'll pass it over to Crystal to introduce herself. Then she'll dive into the details that'll help your business compliant to sell in Europe. During today's session, feel free to use the chat to ask your questions, and we'll do our best to answer them as we go. We'll also have dedicated time at the end of today to answer any lingering questions. Also, during the Q&A portion, I'll post a quick 5-question survey that'll provide us with feedback to improve and cover more topics in the future. So let us know what you want to see in the future. And with that, I'll pass it over to Crystal.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. My name is Sitonic, and I'm currently an account manager at VATAi, an official Amazon service provider for global tax and product compliance. And I'm so excited to be here. And I just wanted to say a quick thank you to everyone for taking the time out of your busy day to join us today. And I also see some of my clients already joining me. So thank you so much for supporting. And I hope this session is still informative because there's always more that we can learn about this industry for sure. But yes, I wanted to thank Jeremy and Amazon as well for giving me the platform and the opportunity today to share more information about why you should expand to the EU and all the opportunities in the European market there. So to start off, I was asked to give a little background on VATAi or VATAi. It's pronounced differently depending on the region. But I guess before that, a little bit more about myself. During my time at VATAi, I've completed over 1,000 applications for all the nitty and gritty numbers that you need and regulations that you need to comply with to sell in the EU, and also manage over a portfolio of over 100 clients. Yes, so I'm very excited to share my knowledge and experiences with you here today. But yes, with VATAi, I am currently based in the Seattle area, super close to the Amazon headquarters. So we have an office here in the US in the Seattle area, and then also in Belgium. And then our third office is in Asia, specifically Shenzhen, China, where everything e-commerce is based in this one city in China, only 1 hour away from Hong Kong, actually a fun fact. So that's where our story starts in 2019 in Asia, where our sister company, eVatMaster, joined the compliance game. And 2019 sounds pretty recent, but actually thinking about it now, it's 7 years, almost coming to 10 years now. Yes, so we joined the compliance game and with the mission and intention of being different from all the other compliance providers. We saw that there was demand in China for all these sellers to go globally because it's so competitive in China with the 1 billion people populated there. So we took the opportunity and thought, what could we do different to make expansion, global expansion, easier for all the sellers in China? So we came up with 3 core values, the first being fast response times. When it comes to expanding across borders, you're already dealing with a lot of new government authorities, accountants, and as we know, just like we deal with the IRS in the United States here, it's not going to be a fast process. So knowing that at some point, after the ball has left our court into another person's hands, such as the tax authorities. What can we do up until that point to speed up the process and make it as smooth and fast as possible for the client? So we really stand out with how fast we reply, and then competitive pricing. Expanding globally already is a few extra costs here and there. So what can we do to make it as cost effective for the client as possible? And the third core value that we have is just a sense of personal touch. Like all my clients have my direct line. I do WhatsApp group chats, and I like to also kind of take from Amazon a little bit. I see it as our core value. It translates a little different from Mandarin to English, but a little bit of customer obsession, like reaching out to the customer before they reach out to us, knowing what the customer wants and needs before they even know themselves. And we advise them on the best path and the easiest path to expand to more countries. So with these three core values, we quickly rose to become the #1 compliance provider in China with over 24% market shares actually, which may sound a little small because like Google, for example, is 40% shares, but in a country with 1 billion people, over 24% is pretty high. And as you can see in the presentation I prepared, we work with huge brands such as Anchor, where I'm pretty sure almost everyone has used their charging cord or portable battery of some kind. Even DJI, a huge player in the drone market right now, the #1 actually. Yes, and then you can see that we also partner with more platforms other than just Amazon too, and help sellers all across the world to expand and grow their business. And so, because we had so much success in China with being the #1 compliance provider, we wanted to see if China being the first biggest e-commerce market, of course, we know how big they are in the global e-commerce market, but also US is a close second. And friendly competition, friendly and healthy competition always brings out the best in people. Just like I always think of the space race with the USSR and the United States. So our mission is how can we replicate the same success we had with all these Chinese e-commerce sellers expanding globally with the US market. So can we get the US market to be the same, as expansive, as blown up as it is in China and with the energy there? So that's a little bit about us and enough about us, but moving on to what everyone's here for. So I know that if you joined today's session, you are already thinking of expanding to Europe, but I wanted to just give a little bit more points to kind of push you to take action, hopefully within the next week. The summer's coming to an end, and then we're ramping and preparing for the Q4 holiday selling season. So now is the time to take the opportunity to just focus on these matters here as well. And in time for Q4, hopefully in the holidays, if that's something on your plan that you've been thinking about. But yes, so in this day and age, I feel that if you're not ahead, you're already behind. With how fast everything is developing from AI, manufacturing, technology, you always have to do your best to get ahead and be competitive in every single aspect, especially in an industry like this, such as e-commerce, where it's a global market. E-commerce doesn't know any borders. Right now, all these Korean skincare brands are coming over to the US and kind of competing hand in hand with the US skincare brands. Like I know myself, my friends, everyone. So your competitors from other countries are in your backyard. So the question is, why are you not in theirs? And also to diversify your revenue sources and not just put all of your eggs in one basket. As we know, nowadays in the US, the tariffs are pretty high, which has had an effect on many of the businesses. So instead of just depending on just one US market, like the third point here, or the fourth point, reduces dependency on just the one market, why don't you expand to other countries to keep your revenue sources more diversified, your business sustainable? Because that's what it's all about nowadays, sustainability and environmental impact, but also in the aspect of your business. Like you have to stay on top of your game and continue developing and innovating to be on top, just like Amazon, I think. Yeah, so it just has to be this kind of energy where you want to think bigger than just being stuck within your borders. For example, the Chinese sellers. So yeah, as you can see in the first point here, obviously, Amazon.com in the United States is the largest Amazon marketplace, but actually the second and third largest is in Germany and the UK. And recently I was in an event e-commerce event at Turkey, actually, where I was shopping on Amazon Turkey. I just forgot my business card holder. I wanted to look professional at the events, and there were no options. And so I thought to myself, man, if these US sellers could just be here, even in the EU market or UK market or Turkey market, they might be like one of the highest sellers there for these items like this. Because I'm so used to in the US where there's prime shipping, it's so fast and there's so many different options. And then I go to a country just like Turkey or any other EU country, and the choices are drastically limited. So I just want US sellers to know there's so much potential overseas, and you should just give it a try, especially with a provider like us that's here to help you make it as easy and as cost effective as possible. Yeah, so these are my 5 reasons here. You can read. But yes, just wanted to cover a little bit more about that and kind of explain why there should be action taken as soon as possible to expand to these EU markets. And especially now where Amazon's doing a really big push, I heard from some of my sellers already, they're getting some kind of reimbursement for expanding to Italy or something, for example. So yes, the earlier you get on this train, the better, and just be competitive in these markets that haven't been known to its full potential yet. But to dive deep into what everyone's really here for, the key compliance requirements, the bread and butter of selling into the EU. So today I'll hit you with a lot of information, but if you don't take anything else from this webinar or can't remember everything, I just want you to remember at least 3 things. You only need 3 things to sell in the EU. The first being VAT, the second being EPR, and then RSP, which I'll dive into each category there. But I like to think of these 3 main things as umbrellas, and then everything else that you need falls into one of these 3 umbrellas here. So the first point that we'll start with is VAT, value added tax. So I know people make a comparison close that VAT is basically the sales tax, but in the EU. But the difference is in the US, sales tax is only charged at the end of the purchase, right? But in the EU and the UK and other countries, the value added tax is charged to see the tax at every stage of your production. So that's where it differs a little bit. So it's not just charged at the end, but it's charged little by little from the manufacturer supplier to the seller that's selling it to the buyer as well. But yeah, that's just kind of the general overview, but you don't really need to know that. That's not too important. It's more important about how to get this VAT and why you need it. So when it comes to VAT, you only need it if you meet one of 2 cases. Number 1, you're storing in that EU country. So whether it's through fulfillment by Amazon or your own storage provider, if you have other additional channels like Shopify, yes, the VAT is required for every country that you store in. So you can't even do anything without getting a VAT. You can't even technically ship goods without getting a VAT over to the EU. So yes, number 1, if you store in that country, you need a VAT. It's as simple as that. And number 2, most of the cases people fall into number 1, but number 2, if you're the importer on record into that country, if you're the person importing goods, not FedEx, not UPS, not some other storage provider, but you as your US company are importing goods into the EU or UK markets, you would need to have a VAT for those countries as well. Yes, so that is the basics of value added tax. Again, you only need it for every country that you store in. So right underneath where I explain the value added tax, you'll see 4 other abbreviations, a lot of abbreviations in this industry, just like a lot of industries. But I'll just give a quick summary on each one, just for your knowledge. But yes, as soon as you talk to providers like us, you'll be able to figure out whether you need these or not. But the number 1 thing is the EORI or EORI number. And this is just basically the number you need to import goods into the UK market or the EU market. It's called a customs number, essentially. But to get an EORI, you have to get a VAT first. Again, as you can see, the EORI and all these other small things fall under the big VAT umbrella. So yes, to get a EORI to import into the UK, you need 1 EORI for the UK, 1 EORI for the EU. And in the EU, you only need 1 EORI for all the 27 EU countries. So you don't need to get an EORI for every single country. But yes, so EORI is only needed to import the goods, 1 for all the EU countries, and then one for the UK separately. So that's EORI. And then next is OSS, which also falls under the VAT umbrella. To get an OSS number, also called one-stop shop, you need to have a VAT first in one of the EU countries. So one-stop shop is essentially only applies to you if you sell over 10,000 euros annually across all the EU countries, so cross-border sales. So if you do 10,000 euros just in Germany, for example, just giving you an example, then you wouldn't be required to have OSS. But if you do 10,000 euros across Germany, France, Spain, and Italy, then that's when you would require to have an OSS, which we can help with as well. So the OSS is one-stop shop, required only if you exceed 10,000 euros. And basically, for example, you have a German VAT, then you would get German OSS if you exceed that threshold in the EU that requires the OSS number. So after you get the German OSS, you'll submit and pay your tax all to the German tax office, but then they will distribute it to all the other EU countries in which you have sales and customers in. So it just simplifies the process for you. Instead of having to get VAT registered in every single country that you sell to, you only need to have a VAT in the countries you store in. And then if you exceed the 10,000 euro threshold in the year, then you will need the OSS number, to be compliant across all those countries because you're considered a big seller at that point. And then two more things. IOSS doesn't apply too much to Amazon sellers, but just wanted to put it on your radar as well in case you come across the term in your journey. But it only applies to total shipments valuing under 150 euros. It's essentially a number that you can get after you get your EU VAT. For example, you have a Poland VAT, then you're just a small seller selling shipments under 150 euros, and then you would get a Poland IOSS for the reason that you don't want your customer to be surprised with custom fees or import VAT fees once your goods get into customs. So I guess it's not very common in the US, but I've ordered stuff from Japan recently, and then I get an email saying it's held at customs until I pay a duty. So IOSS basically, import one-stop shop, basically prevents that for the buyers, and then good for the sellers because it also increases your chance of being able to sell your product without having to trouble the buyer with that fee. Yes, so that is IOSS, OSS, EORI. And my last thing that I wanted to cover also under the VAT umbrella is something called GST, which just stands for Goods and Services Sales Tax. And this is for the countries such as Australia and Canada and even India. It's just basically VAT, but just a different name for those countries. That's what they use, the goods and services tax. So just wanted to let you know there. But yes, we also do those countries as well if you need it. But before I move on, since I've been talking for a little bit now and don't want you all to get too tired of my voice, I wanted to let ask Jeremy to kind of cover the benefits of Amazon's Pan-EU FBA program, which is related to this VAT topic. So if Jeremy...
Yeah, thanks, Crystal. Yeah, so the Pan-EU FBA program and how you can leverage it to effectively grow your business in the EU. Basically, while Europe is comprised of multiple countries, it doesn't have to be complicated from a logistics perspective. We strongly recommend sellers enable Pan-EU FBA given the investment we have made to make things simpler for you. At our scale, we can negotiate better bulk rates for US sellers. So you'll be able to reach multiple countries from a single warehouse with Pan-EU FBA. You'll use a single country warehouse with no cross-border fees. You'll experience faster delivery across Europe with Prime, and you'll be Prime eligible. Having that Prime badge basically guarantees 1 to 2 days shipping delivery time. And sellers who have that Prime badge are 35% higher to convert those buyers than those who do not. This will simplify your inventory placement and ensure that faster deliveries and a better customer experience is had across the board. So now let me quickly touch on the dual inbound reality that the Brexit created, because it directly shapes where you send your stock. The stock you ship to the UK cannot be redistributed by Amazon to EU countries since the UK left the EU in 2019. So entering the UK requires VAT registration, and the stock you send there serves only the UK. The stock you ship into the EU, by contrast, can be redistributed across EU countries, which means you would need two inbound points to cover Europe fully, one for the UK and one for the EU. Let's walk through exactly how EU redistribution depends on your VAT registrations, because this is the part that US sellers want to understand. When you hold a VAT in several EU countries, you can ship your stock to just one of them, and Amazon then redistributes that stock across the other countries where you also hold VAT at no cross border costs, just as it does in the US. The requirement to remember is that Amazon can redistribute your stock into countries only where you hold a VAT for that country. A common question that I get from sellers is whether if they can still sell in EU countries where you do not hold a VAT. The answer is yes, but the method changes. Because you do not hold a VAT in those countries, you cannot store local stock and fulfill through FBA there. So instead, Amazon fulfills those orders across the border from the EU country where you do hold a VAT and local inventory. Compared with local fulfillment, cross-border fulfillment extends delivery to as long as 5 days, and then the customers become responsible for that cross-border fee, which makes your offer less competitive against sellers who fulfill locally. I always recommend the 5 market approach because it delivers the strongest result for sellers. I would guide you toward VAT registration and local fulfillment across the UK, Germany, France, Italy, and Spain, since that coverage lets Amazon place inventory close to customers, protects delivery speed, and keeps costs competitive. Pushing for that 5 market expansion is the single greatest impact you can have when you make your expansion into the EU. Pass it back
Thanks
over to
so
you,
much.
Crystal. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. Yes, so all the benefits of the Pan EU FBA program. And yeah, even if you, like Jeremy recommended, it's best to have 5 of the EU countries. But even if you only have 2 EU countries, such as Germany or France, especially with the new sellers that are a little more nervous in starting in the EU, as I've encountered, you could still sell to all 9 EU countries in the Pan EU FBA program from Amazon, Spain, Italy. France, Spain, Italy, Germany, Belgium, Ireland, Poland, and then 2 more other countries, Netherlands and Sweden as well. So yes, you'll just store in those 2 countries you have the VAT in, but be able to sell to more countries through Amazon's very helpful Pan EU FBA program too. And before I moved on, I wanted to answer the big question maybe some of you are already thinking, how do I even get this VAT number? So it's just 5 simple steps. The first step being first decide where you want to store your products, or even you can go to Amazon's global selling tab, sell globally, and then see based on data and statistics which market your product would do best in. They have those statistics inside Seller Central for you to view and decide which country you want to start off with. So after you decide which countries you want to store in, the second is submitting your VAT applications for those countries through a provider like us. And then number 3, you just wait, which is the hardest part for many many of our clients and sellers. So after the ball is out of our court into the tax authorities' hands, and we just have to wait until they process the application. And then number 4, after you receive your VAT number, that's when you can start shipping goods over to the fulfillment centers, as long as you're also covered in the other 2 categories I'll touch base on really quickly here, EPR and RSP. And then number 5, you'll just be responsible for doing the quarterly filings, for example, in the UK, monthly for France. So it differs per country, per period as well. So that's when you're just responsible for logging in. If you went with us, for example, the VATAi.com portal, and it's like TurboTax, but for global tax and Amazon sellers, you log in, you use the API connection to connect to your Amazon platform, and then just let us pull the sales data directly. And then there's a chance for you to upload any invoices you'd like to try to reclaim. And then after you hit file now, it will be sent directly to the tax authorities for most of the countries, unless it's like France, there's a little bit more of a complex detail I can go into there. But yes, in most countries, it will be sent directly to the tax authority, just like a TurboTax, sent directly to the IRS, and then you will be shown how much you have to pay or how much you get back as a credit. But the core thing is Amazon already collects most of the VAT. You don't have to change your prices to accommodate the VAT. Amazon already collects that, and then you just basically need to file and report it to the tax authorities using the sales data pull from Amazon. Yeah, and then other providers have this API connection as well, but that's essentially how the product would work, how to obtain a VAT in those 5 steps and then maintain it afterwards. Yes, so the next category I wanted to touch into is EPR. Oh, and by the way, we only have one slide after this with actual content that I'm talking about, so today is not too slide heavy, just more of me talking heavy, but hopefully Jeremy gave you a good break from me going nonstop. But yes, EPR, the next category that you need is extended producer responsibility, which is all that it is just a waste fee that's required in the UK and the EU. So there's 3 main categories when it comes to EPR. There's packaging waste, which all sellers fall into, of course. All their products generate some kind of packaging waste, whether it's a cardboard box or a plastic wrap. And then 2, WEE, or V, as I like to call it, with the German V, as I hear most of my clients and then my colleagues too. But yes, the WE stands for waste, electrical, and electronical equipment. So only applies to you if the product you sell, such as a lamp or like a children's toy with electrical wiring inside, would generate that kind of waste. And the third category is battery waste. So if you already sell a product such as a portable battery or even a children's toy with battery already inside, you would also have to register for each country's recycling authority under that category of waste. So how it works is that you just need to register with the recycling authority in every single country that you sell the product to. Some countries are more heavily enforced, such as Germany. You can't even do a listing on Amazon.de until you present a packaging number, a packaging EPR number, or a WE EPR number. Yes, and then it's important to get started on these as soon as possible, as some of the sellers already know there's a new regulation in the EU starting August 12th, where you used to be able to use Amazon's Pay on Behalf program before, where Amazon kind of took care of this behind the scenes for you, but now the EU authorities want the sellers to register in all the main countries they sell as well. So that's one thing to keep in mind when it comes to EPR. And filing works the same way, and reporting annually works the same way, just as VAT does. You log into your provider's portal and then submit whichever report they need you to pull from Seller Central. And then from there, we will see if all the packaging waste you generated is covered under the basic amount you paid the provider at the beginning already, such as 100 kilograms of cardboard, 10 kilograms of plastic. 80% of sellers don't go over this, but if they do, in my client cases, I've only seen max being paid as like 200 euros for the year if they really go over that basic coverage in my experience. Yes, and then the third thing is RSP, the third item required to sell in the EU. RSP, also called responsible person, or AR, or authorized representative. So it's used pretty interchangeably there. But what is authorized representative? A mandatory local legal entity in the EU and the UK that will stand to represent your products. So just like in the US, if you ever maybe are weird like me and you flip to the back of a cereal box or a toothpaste tube and you see have questions, contact this random company in Ohio. So this RSP AR requirement basically is for the EU as well. So just a local legal entity that can answer local customers' questions and authorities in their time zone and language. And it is required to have an AR for any kind of product that you sell in the EU, but for the UK, you only need an AR, mandatory AR, if you sell high-risk products such as cosmetics or children's toys or electronical products. Yes, so that is when it comes to the AR RSP requirement. But like we always recommend, especially with all the US companies, you don't have a entity in or any employees in the UK, so it's always good to have that responsible person if you can spare the extra 400 euros a year, just to have that on your packaging so that sellers can contact you and we can handle those cases for you first. So that is VAT, EPR, and RSP, all those 3 big umbrellas, the 3 main things that you'll need to sell there. Oh yeah, and then I forgot to mention for RSP, as you can see, I put product testings and labeling under this category umbrella as well, because as part of our responsible person or authorized representative service, we also manually review your labels for you to ensure based on your product and based on the EU countries you're selling to that you have everything you need on that label to be compliant. And we're actually updating a labeling tool where you can just put in the kind of product you sell and where you're selling to, and it'll actually generate everything that you need to put on your label in some shape or form. So it'll just give you the requirements, and then you just figure out how to put that on your label with your designer and within your internal company. And we also do product testings, whether it's CE, UKCA marking. If you ever flipped the back of a children's toy box, or even on your electronics now, you'll see that marking somewhere on your mouse, perhaps. So yes, we also do those testings required for children's toys, electronics, even other items like jewelry in some cases. Yes, we do those testings for you under this RSP bubble too. And then the last point I wanted to touch are just additional services that you might find useful. Trademarks, everyone knows what that is. It's good to have your US trademark, but even better to have a trademark in the EU and UK as you expand to those countries. And then we also do company registration services. For example, if you wanted to sell on Amazon UK and UK TikTok shop, which requires a UK company information actually, and so you will be able to get that through us as well. So those are all the main key compliance requirements that you need to know. And as I mentioned, just remember the three things: VAT, EPR, and RSP, and then you'll be good to go from there. And my final slide with real content are the common compliance mistakes. So I haven't had a chance actually to do this kind of bit yet. So I'm really excited this time. Amazon requested me to specifically touch base on the most common compliance mistakes and how you can avoid them to ensure your transition and expansion overseas is as smooth and easy as possible. So I'll actually start a little backwards on the right side here. So the first mistake that we see all the time with 70% of cases is inconsistent company details. So what I mean by that, for example, right now we have clients that don't have LLC listed on their Amazon storefront name. Like it's just Crystal's Cookies instead of Crystal's Cookies LLC, their legal entity name. And then when you're expanding overseas, it's important that all these details are handled before you start the process, or even during the process. We can help you adjust and fix the things on Seller Central if needed to match across the board. But you are going to be submitting your application officially to tax authorities in the UK, to the government in France and Germany, and maybe they don't know all the requirements and the details about US company entity legal names. So it's important that we just play it safe and match all the legal entities names and records and addresses across the board. So it has to match on your company registration certificate, your Amazon EU storefronts, whether it's Amazon.de, Amazon France, Amazon Spain, and then also the application you submit through your provider or through VATAi.com here. Yes, so we will need the legal company name and the company address to match across all those three areas to ensure that your application is successful and there's no delays on the authorities pushing back, because they don't like to waste time. Most of them are already really hard to work with already. So if you give them any reason, for example, even something as simple as the suite number, we've seen the application be rejected for. The Amazon address doesn't have the suite number of the company's office, but the company registration does. So we can't depend on the authorities to just understand that. We need to get ahead of it and just make sure at the very beginning to clarify all these details, combine as many company documents as you need to prove all this information, prove the consistency across the board. So that's the number one mistake that I encounter pretty often when I'm helping all these sellers submit their applications to go overseas. And then the second point is not starting early enough. So all these VAT numbers, most of them take 2 or more months, for example, UK, Germany, and France. So as soon as you receive the idea in your head that you want to start this EU expansion, it's great to just schedule a call with the provider, get in touch with them as soon as possible. Just let it be a quick chat to see what the game plan is from here. And then even starting with just one country first, such as the UK is what I usually recommend, so that your stock is at least stored somewhere near the EU region, and then much easier to expand from there. So the moment you're thinking about EU expansion, even if it is today, please schedule a call with me, or later Jeremy will show you how to get in touch with other providers as well via the Amazon service provider portal or compliance services store. So yes, start early so you can get ahead, and then it takes a while to submit these applications to get everything in order. So that's mistake number 2 that you should avoid if you're thinking about expanding. Even if you're an existing seller already, it's good to always start if you're thinking about expanding to the Netherlands or storing in Spain even, yeah, especially Spain. It's a long timeline. So yes, please start as soon as possible, as soon as you have the thought in your mind. And then number 3 is not protecting your intellectual property. So I usually didn't push like trademark services too much because a lot of the US sellers already have their brand registry and US trademark, and they're like, it's good enough to go to the EU, right? And I say, oh yeah, it's good enough. But then 2 weeks ago, I actually worked with a seller that makes over $2 million US dollars in revenue on Amazon. And then she received a email from brand registry in the UK saying there's 16 different companies selling similar products under her trademark in the UK. So at that point, I realized like, oh, it's always good to kind of just tell the clients the risks, especially if you're selling a really popular product or a very commonly used product. It's important to protect your trademark and IPs over in the countries you're expanding to, especially as your brand grows. And then even now, I'm helping her get her UK trademark because that's a service we offer to as soon as possible so that we can deal with this case. But even if it's just 800 euros, we still have to spend 3 to 4 weeks or 3 to 4 months actually to get it approved officially via the World Intellectual Property Organization. So yes, important if you know your product is kind of more commonly used or at risk. If you did some research, we have providers that help with that as well. Do some research on your competitors abroad. It's important to get that trademark and protect your IP as soon as possible to avoid crazy cases like those. Like it was 16 different companies and not just 2 or 3 that are selling counterfeit products. Yeah. And then as you start to succeed, people will notice that too. And then there are not so nice people in the world that will definitely go after those products. Okay, so 4 more before everything's over. Yes, so the 4th point is waiting to open a global storefront. So a common misconception that sellers have is that you need a VAT to open a storefront in the UK or Germany, but that's not true. You can just, it's as simple as going to your Seller Central, clicking on the country up top instead of the United States, choose United Kingdom or Germany, go through the KYC verification again, all those documents for those EU countries, and then just have the storefront open because it will be required on your VAT application no matter which provider that you decide to go with, because the tax authorities need proof that you've done everything up until that point, that all you need from them is please just give me a VAT number so I can start selling. Like I've literally done everything here. You can see, yes, I have my amazon.co.uk storefront set up. Here I already inputted the address. My company name is on there. Even for Germany, it's a little more strict. They want to see more screenshots such as, have you created an active listing? You don't need a VAT to do that either. You just need to create an active listing. Have the EPR numbers, which is a requirement to do the active listing on Germany. But yes, get ahead of that now and then plan for delays, because I've had that with a few clients where, they tried to open at amazon.co.uk and there's some technical error issue that takes 2 to 3 weeks to resolve, sometimes even more than a month. So if you're thinking about it now, just go onto Seller Central, do that basic step so that you're all ready for your application as soon as you're ready to submit the VAT. And yes, that's something I'm happy to assist with as well. So 3 more common mistakes: missing responsible person information. So again, it must be required for all the products, no matter what kind of product that you sell in the EU, and it needs to be displayed somewhere on your packaging so that sellers can contact, and it can't just be our QR code, it needs to be physically on there. So that's a common case that we've run into a few times where people think it's not necessary, and then even when they try to make a listing on Amazon, it asks, hey, do you even have a responsible person in the EU to start listing this product? And then they come to me asking for it, and it takes another week to get it. So yes, it's important that you just have all this information ready. It is required. And no, your local friend or family in France can't be your responsible person. They're not an official legal entity that has the capacity to represent your products in the case that something goes wrong. There's some kind of I forgot the word, but some kind of something wrong with your product. Yes, so RSP information is required to be on your label in some shape or form, which we help you with. We give you that label already pre-made. You just have to put it somewhere on your current packaging. Yes, and then 2 more, not obtaining the EPR numbers. So along with VATs, now some of the EPR numbers are taking 2 months or more. Yes, so it's important to get them ahead of time now. And with the August 12th regulation, which is in action today in the US, you're required to have those EPR numbers in all the countries that you sell in. So it's important to get ahead of it now. Like luckily, some of the sellers already received notice that on their Amazon Seller Central that the deadline has been extended. But again, with all the sellers submitting their applications now, the recycling authorities realistically are not able to process it in time for this August 12th regulation. So please get ahead and get the EPR, get the RSP, get the VAT, even if it's only for one country you want to start out with, just get ahead of all that before it becomes a problem for you where you can't do anything and you're kind of just blocked until you get the EPR number back from the recycling authorities. And then last but not least, storing without VAT. I know sometimes Seller Central it's pretty easy to accidentally click buttons, especially when you're exploring around, and you may or may not enable FBA or storage in those EU countries by accident if you're not reading carefully. So it has happened with a few of my client cases before. But yes, all we need you to do is just open the Amazon storefront and then make sure your company details are consistent across the board. And then from there, just let the provider or us handle your VAT registrations. And then we'll show you what screenshots to get, where to click in order to submit your VAT application successfully. So it's really important that you don't start any FBA storage, even if you say, oh, I heard my friend is like selling now. Yes, but for how long can they go without a VAT number if they're selling and storing in those EU countries? And the penalties and consequences here, as you can see, you'll have backdated VAT liabilities that you have to pay, for example, 63 euros per filing period to reclaim back and report back to the tax authorities. And then in addition to the liabilities that you will have acquired because you're selling and storing in the VAT or storing in those countries without a VAT, you might have interest from local tax authorities as well for not submitting those filings on time or not paying those VAT payments on time. And then it's also recording your tax history, and shipments are held at customs, which both make it hard for you to expand to more countries in the future. So yes, be careful and don't listen to all your friends. Just if you're storing in that country, you need a VAT sooner or later. So it's better to be sooner. And yes, I will finish off here with, again, thank you everyone for taking the time to join us today. I really appreciate you all listening to me talk for like 25 minutes. And as a thank you, we wanted to offer this exclusive offer only for the webinar attendees today. So actually our compliance services store on Amazon, or the compliance services store portal on Amazon that Jeremy will go over in a bit, is already at a 10% off, a much lower rate than our standard VATAi pricing for all the other platforms. And so as long as you scan this QR code and register an account, or if you already have an account, please reach out to your VATAi account manager and share that you attended the webinar today and saw this offering available until one more month from now, since we want you to take action and take advantage of this offer while we still have it. Yes, but it will be a 20% total value, essentially, because the compliance services store is already 10% off with this 10% off that we're also offering here today for all services from VAT registrations, transfers, EPR registrations, and responsible person and authorized representative services. So please take advantage. We want you to get the best deals possible. But yes, it's only for a limited time because we'll have more offerings in the future. So yes, I hope to speak with you all soon. At the end of this presentation, after Jeremy goes over how to use the CSS portal, there will be my contact information, even a Calendly link. So let's book a call, let's chat, and thank you so much for listening to me this whole time. Okay.
Thanks, Crystal. So much information, so much detail. Thanks for covering all that. That was great. In terms of things on the Amazon side, to get in contact with providers like VATAi, we have a portal in Seller Central that includes end-to-end packages, as Crystal mentioned. We partnered with these service providers to create packages so that you can easily contact them and explain your goals, how your business is structured, what your products are, and then they'll service you through the entire process and make sure you're compliant in Europe. And since we partner with them, they're already up to speed on everything you need to know to have a much smoother experience expanding into Europe. Use the QR code that Crystal shared to get in touch with VATAi directly. To get in contact with more providers, scan the QR code on this slide. This will direct you to the Sell Globally page within Seller Central. The second way you can access this page is if you use the search bar and search Sell Globally in Seller Central. And then the third way is by clicking on the hamburger menu within Seller Central in the top left. Under Inventory, you'll find Sell Globally. Once you're on that page, you're going to see a list of providers, service providers, as well as some estimated pricing packages. Rest assured that by clicking on any one of these providers and submitting your information, you're not committed to paying or working with that provider. Amazon is not going to charge your account just because you submitted this. This is just an inquiry form to let them know that you want to get in touch with that provider, explore, and then decide if this is something you want to do. You can track this progress directly in Seller Central within that provider page. Crystal, if you can go to the next slide, I'll show a little bit what that looks like. So from start to finish, basically, this is the Sell Globally page. You're going to want to select your region. And on the next slide, you'll select your provider. You'll enter your contact detail page, your information. And then on the final fifth and sixth step, you'll confirm, and then you can track your progress within Seller Central. And here they are right here. The next slide is going to be our compliance services store. So this is another page if you want to get in touch with any one of these providers, and this page is called the Service Hub, and these are just for one-off services. So as I mentioned earlier, we bundled together the end-to-end packages before. These are for one-off services, like if you need a single VAT and nothing else, or if you need EPR in for one country, you can go to Service Hub, and it's the same process. You connect with them, fill out your information, it all gets tracked in Seller Central. The QR code here will direct you to that Service Hub landing page, but you can also use a search bar and type in Service Hub, and it'll bring it up. You can also go to amazon.com/Service Hub. The last thing I want to cover is Seller Assistant. This is an AI-powered assistant within Seller Central. Seller Assistant is basically a conversational tool that helps you find information, access insights, and manage your business, and it's free to use. You can ask it anything, like how to sell an Amazon store, how to use FBA, or what requirements are there to sell a particular product. You can ask personalized business insights. You can ask about recent sales or your inventory health. You can ask it to help with resolving issues such as updating a listing or addressing stranded inventory. Understanding how Seller Assistant supports you so you can rely on it with confidence, and it will because it draws from information across Seller Central, and with your permission it can even take action on your behalf. And when it cannot fully resolve an issue, it connects you to a human, can create a support case with all the relevant information, so it's already included. And because it's aware of all the recent changes on seller news and help pages, it can give you the latest available guidance on time sensitive policy questions. So remember that, with all AI tools, this one in particular is experimental. It can make mistakes. So verify important details using the source links it provides and avoid relying on it for any professional, legal, or financial advice. With that being said, I encourage you all to check it out. It's a really cool AI tool built right in Seller Central. It's free, it's easy to use, and it can get you answers to a lot of the things that you might have questions about, even after this webinar. All right, so let's move on to Q&A. I believe we've answered most of those in the chat here, but continue to add any other questions. I'm going to put up a survey here. It's a five question survey, basically just trying to get a little bit more feedback on what we can improve on and what other topics you want to see in the future for webinars. So give me a minute while I pull that up.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone. Yeah, it looks like our moderator already answered a lot of the questions, but yes, I have my contact information here, so anything you want to discuss in detail, let's just schedule a time so we can chat quickly, but I'll be looking here for any other messages to reply to.
All right, that survey is up on the screen now. Again, only 5 questions, so it's pretty quick. And we thank you again for joining today.
Thank you, everyone. Hope that your journey over to the EU is successful.
All right, we'll give folks a couple more seconds to submit their survey and any other questions.
Yeah, looks like there's some more detailed questions. I can go into detail if they schedule a call, but yeah, just don't want to go into too much detail with all the attendees here. So thank you for submitting your questions.
All right, thanks everybody for joining. We'll have a recording of this webinar available on Solar University. Thank you again for taking the time. Thank you, Crystal from VATAi. Amazing work today. Thanks.
Thank you so
Have a
much,
great day.
Shirley. Bye.